Okay, this video is going to take us through page 4 of our notes, chapter 1 notes. And so we're going to take some notes there, and also you should have open the indents, comments, whitespace .java file, which is available in week 3 module. And we're going to go through actually making changes to learn how to format it. And so it'd be important for you to follow along with the video and do this in JGrasp yourself as well. So let's look at our notes here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at, kind of going to go out of order here on the notes. So let's look at 1D. Now we're talking about indenting here. It says use the tab key to indent. We've already talked about this in class, but use the tab key to indent. You want to stay away from using the space bar. And students end up going the wrong place. Now if you do use the space bar, it is 3 space bars. Hitting the space bar 3 times is the same as an indent, but I would suggest you use the tab key. Hold down the shift key and press tab to decrease indent. So when you got to go backwards, then you can hold down the shift key and press the tab key, and that takes you back to the previous indent location, or you can backspace 3 times. Now indenting seems to be a problem for some students, but it doesn't have to be. So here's how we look at it. We have things that are along the left margin, and then we have things that are indented once, and then on the first level, and then a second level of indentation. And so let's look at the top. The top right here, if we press tab in front of mystery, and then we can select the next 3 lines and press tab. This is what our first indent, this is where the first indent is located, first level of indent. So on the left margin are the block comment symbols, which you've already learned how to do. The class header stays on the left margin. Its 2 braces, its opening and closing braces, will also stay on the left margin. The next level is the main method header. So if you press tab once, so that's in the same level as as in the header heading, and then that its opening curly brace and closing curly brace down here are in that first level of indent. All right, so that's how the first level of indent goes. Now within the body of the main method, which is between the 2 curly braces, that is going to be indented even one more level. And so what happens, you can select all of these lines, and you can press tab once, and this is the way a lot of students will turn their work in, and they'll lose points for that. You need to go in a second time, so the second level of indentation. Now you can see already how much better this looks than what it did before. All right, it's already a lot easier to read, and we're not even done making it easier. All right, the next thing we want to look at is vertical space. So on our notes, we talk about white space. Effective use of white space horizontally and vertically, so 1A, makes your code easier to read and therefore easier to edit or debug. Now debug means to fix the errors. You get syntax errors, as we'll learn about later, but when we click on compile, those error messages you're getting, you go back and you fix those. That's called debugging. So makes your code easier to read and therefore easier to edit or to debug. When you have white space, things are spread out and not so scrunched together. Now let's go to 1C, vertical space. So the vertical space here is when you strategically use a blank line to separate sections of code, and we separate the sections of code by hitting the enter key an extra time. So by using the enter key, we then create a blank line in our source code. It's like adding more space between paragraphs in an essay. It's going to be a whole lot easier to read, and you'll see this as we go. So anyway, so this is what we're going to demonstrate right now then. So we go back here, and let's get rid of that. Alright, so what we're going to do, the first place of vertical space or extra blank or extra enter is after the heading, the block comment heading. So hit enter after line 5, and so that's a blank line. That's called vertical space. It's creating space up and down vertically. And then what you do inside the main method body is you look for groups of lines of code that go together, that make sense to be together. And it's just like in paragraphs, you're going to have sentences that pertain to the same, let's say, opening statement or the same topic sentence. And so when we look at this one's easy because the first 3 lines of code deal with a Bible verse. The second, kind of in between the first and second sections, is a line of code that produces a blank line in the output. I like to put this by itself, so I'll hit enter after the Bible verse and enter after the line of code that creates a blank line in the output. Alright, so already you should be seeing how this is easier to read. And so then we naturally, of course, have the third section, which is the Papa John slogan. So that's vertical space we just created, and already you should see this looks a lot better, looks a lot easier to read. Alright, now the next thing we're going to go to is we're going to look at, we're actually going to look at line comments. Now I will mention this while we're on here. The block comments, which we've already been doing in class, that or multi-line comments, uses these 2 symbols, and so that's something you should know. And then and so we've already modeled this, and you've already done this already before. So anyway, so that's the block comment. The line comment only makes one line of code turn orange. And so here's an example of a line comment. And I don't know why there's so much space in between it, but anyways, so you start with the 2 line comment symbols, and then you have your text over here. And so we're going to take a look at that. Let's see, let's go ahead and go there. Alright, now the first line comment we want to use is what's called what I would call a purpose comment. So let's hit enter after the class header, and let's type those 2 comment symbols and go purpose colon, and then you could say something like prints Proverbs 9:10 and the Papa John's slogan. So that's the purpose of this program. Very simple. We're learning on very simple right now. And so this tells you the purpose of the program, and sometimes it's good to know that purpose or to be reminded. It'll help you, especially as programs get more complicated, to stay on task and to deal with what you're trying to accomplish, what the purpose of the class is or the program. And so as we go along, we're gonna use another line comment. So on the line 12, let's type those 2 symbols and then go and notice it turns everything orange for one line, but then the lines below it doesn't do anything. Where up here at the top, once you type in that first set of multi-line comments, it turns everything from that point on to the rest of the document orange. Everything else is orange now. That's a comment. That's what comments look like. But once you close it, now the compiler knows that the comment ends at that point. Alright, so let's go back down here. We've got the line comment symbols, and all we're going to do here is name this Proverbs 9:10. So that just names the section. Hit enter. Alright, you don't have to name the blank line output code. You don't need to do anything with that. Line 19, let's do that again. And go Papa John's slogan. Alright, so there we go. These are all the comments we really need. You got your block comment up here, which is the heading or the header, which has the student name and everything. You got the line comment that states the purpose of the class, and then you have these sections of the program that are labeled, and so they're kind of titled, so to speak. Now, just to show you this, we'll cover this in our notes in a second, but you can put a line comment on a line with other code. So you could say prints a blank line in the output. Alright, so you can see it, but only thing that turns orange in here is from those line symbols on to the end of the line. So this is still a valid line of code here that the compiler will actually follow and do what it says. Now, I don't recommend you putting this in your programs. This is just to demonstrate that there may be times where you might want to put something, a line comment on a partial line. So that this just to show you that you can do that. So we don't really need it. Okay, so with line comments, looking at our notes then, line comments, or comments I should say, are ignored by the compiler. So they are ignored by the compiler. The compiler doesn't, there's nothing that the compiler does with them. It just skips over them. If you go to the third bullet down, it says I put these out of order. What happens is, if the compiler is ignoring the comments, then why in the world would we put those in there? Well, that's because comments are used for documentation purposes by the programmer, and for the programmer actually too. And so the comments are used to document the code for the programmer. And so if you can imagine programs that are way more complicated than what we're doing, that might deal with pages of a program, it would be good if the compiler, if the the programmer could look and see, okay, here's a section and it's about Proverbs 9:10. Oh, here's another section. This is Papa John's slogan. So that would be helpful as far as finding areas of code if the programmer needed to edit something or to see what he had done. The other thing is that sometimes in a complicated program that you might be writing, let's say formulas or calculations, code for calculating, and a programmer may write in a line comment or block comment to explain what his line of thinking was, to remind himself when he goes back and looks at the program. So anyways, documentation for the programmer. And then the other thing is that to comment, a line comment can be on its own line. So that's the second bullet here, or just part of a line, which we just demonstrated. Okay, so a line comment can be on its own line or just part of a line of code. And another thing that you can do here in the last bullet for number 4 is you can comment out. So in this inside here, you can write comment, C-O-M-M-E-N-T, out, O-U-T. So a line of code. When you do that, it's a strategy used to test a specific section of code. It's used to test a specific section of code. Now you don't have to do this in yours, but let's just say, just pretend here that we were having issues potentially in the Papa John's slogan area. So what we can do is just comment out the like this. Doesn't matter what form it's in here. So comment out so that the compiler will ignore the first part, so that when we run the program, it's just going to print out the Papa John slogan, and then we can evaluate things that way. So we're testing this code to make sure it's working right. So anyways, that's commenting out, and students actually do that on their own. So anyways, let's go ahead and go on here. Let's take a look at our notes. Okay, so we've done that. We've done the comments. So let's go ahead and take a look at horizontal white space. So in here, this horizontal white space is the space between, generally anyways, it's the space between a symbol and text. Symbol and text. So if we look here, you've got a symbol, the equal sign, and there's no space on either side. So it's all scrunched together. And hopefully you can see that this side, it looks better, or it's more open on the right side than it is on the left side. So here you have the symbol, and then you have a space on either side. So that is horizontal space. Of course, you use the space bar to do that. And so let's go to our program here, and we're going to apply that. Now you've already got horizontal space right here in the heading or the header, and so now the comment symbols are a common place for space. So we want to put a space after the line comment symbols. Alright, so that's the horizontal space, and you want to make sure you do that in your programs. Alright, then let's move on to the see what we have left to do here. So the final thing is something that we've actually already covered. I think I had you write this down somewhere in your notes, but we're going to write it down here. Let's say you get the message, reach the end of file while parsing. And so just a brief reminder of how that looks. I'm going to remove a closing brace, a closing main method brace. And then notice then we get that error. It says reach the end of the file while parsing. And so what we do then is this usually means one of your closing braces, which I just demonstrate, is either missing or it's backwards. So this means one of your closing braces is either missing or it's backwards, and that will cause that error. So the important thing is that you don't ask me when you see that message, but that's something that's in your notes, and you'll get to where you can remember what it means as you go along. Alright, so that is it. Make sure you save this program. At least click on save. It might be good to compile it, but at least save this so you have an example of how to do your indenting, how to do your vertical space, how to do the horizontal space, and to do line comments and block comments. So everything's right there, and this will be a good model for you as you write your programs.